Now, without any further delay, let's begin today's Business Call to Action webinar. What can social entrepreneurs do to really make a difference? It is my pleasure to introduce your first speaker today, Tatiana Besarabova with Business Call to Action. Tatiana, you have the floor.
Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us today for the What Can Social Entrepreneurs Do to Really Make a Difference. For those of you that may not be familiar with the Business Call to Action, let me just give you a brief overview. The Business Call to Action is a global membership platform which encourages private sector companies to develop innovative business models and combine profitability with development impact in support of the United Nations Milan Development Goals. Our members are market leaders and innovators committed to developing commercially viable business ventures that engage people living at the base of the pyramid as consumers, producers, suppliers, and distributors of goods and services. In close to 50 countries and over 80 members as of today, companies are spearheading efforts to provide the poor with the tools and resources they need to successfully promote economic opportunities for them. As a multi-stakeholder supported initiative, BCTA provides a leadership platform for companies to demonstrate their commitment to development and to access global expertise on innovation at the BOP. And today's webinar is held in partnership with the Business Fights Poverty and the Leadership Laboratories, and it will explore how innovators within large MNCs may promote pro-poor business models. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Milan Samani, who is the course director for the Intrapreneur Laboratories and also director of Leadership Laboratories. And Milan, I'm handing it off to you, and you can introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. Tatiana, if I could request for you to please just move the slides along. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be speaking with you here today, and also to be speaking to two people who I admire very greatly. Also, I think I'm very fortunate to call friends, Amit, Mehra, founder and CEO of Reuters Market Light, now known as RML Global, and Mark Thain, Vice President of Social Innovation at Barclays. Before I introduce them and talk a little bit about them and they talk a little bit about themselves, I thought I'd just take a moment to talk to you a bit about who I am and who we are as organizers. So as Tatiana mentioned, she spoke about the Business Call to Action. My organization is Leadership Laboratories, and I also work very closely with Business Fights Poverty, which is a community of 12,000 professionals who work at this interface of business and development. And many of you may, in fact, be members of Business Fights Poverty and receive the weekly emails. How did we come together? And what brought us together is a program that we co-designed called the Intrapreneur Lab. And if I could ask Tatiana just to flip across one slide. The Intrapreneur Lab was an idea that was born out of a collaboration between Leadership Laboratories, Accenture, and Business Fights Poverty. And we were talking and saying that shared value, inclusive business, pro-poor models, these are very much of the moment. There appears to be a bit of a zeitgeist around these. And we were having just a few of us just talking, and they were saying that there aren't that many of these ideas that have actually worked, that are sustainable, scalable. And if you look at the ones that have, we need more of them. We need brilliant ideas. And we were saying that brilliant ideas come from brilliant people. And in my experience, and I work with high performers all over the world, that people are not born brilliant. We become brilliant through the choices that we make and through our life experiences. And out of that seemingly innocent conversation 2 years ago was born this idea for the Intrapreneur Lab. Could we take a group of emerging entrepreneurs, people in large organizations who've got ideas that can make money and do good within their companies, and take them away for 3 days, expose them to a world-class faculty of other entrepreneurs, people like Nick Hughes at M-Pesa, people like Amit Mehra from RML Global, who've actually done it, who've got the battle scars to show. Amit's giggling in front next to me. Who've got the battle scars, who've got the stories to tell, and inspire them, teach them, show them, and then after 3 days, send everyone back to their day jobs, but support them for 3 months. Give them some consulting from Accenture, some leadership coaching from Leadership Laboratories, some access to some high-level contacts through Business Fights Poverty, and give them just that little bit of space to be able to help make their ideas a reality. We can't create a structured environment, and you know what? I don't think you should have a structured environment, because I think sometimes the struggle makes you a bit strong. And but that was a vision for the Intrapreneur Lab. We ran our first one in October at Oxford, and we now have grand plans for many more, one in New York next year and another one in Oxford later on in the year as well. I think one of the best things about the Intrapreneur Lab was the fact that I got to meet some people who, I found deeply inspirational, and, people who are humble, and to me embody what it means to be a leader. To me, a leader is someone who sees opportunities other people don't, and who has no idea how they're going to achieve their very lofty goal, but figures it out and finds a way to make it happen. And I'm not sure whether Mark or Amit would see themselves as that, but I definitely see the both of them as that. So if I could just ask Tatiana to move forward one final slide, and I'll give a very brief introduction to them both, and then we'll hear really what they have to say and their views. Let me start by talking a little bit about Mark. As I said, Mark Thain is the Vice President of Social Innovation at Barclays, and heads up the Social Innovation Facility. Something which, he's humble about it, and of course it was a team effort, but I think, he was quite instrumental in setting up a £25 million facility at Barclays dedicated to finding and funding business ideas within Barclays that align with Barclays' strategic values, have profit potential, have the potential for scale, and have quantifiable, measurable social impact. And Mark will tell us a little bit more about it when I hand over to him. But this is an innovation facility that Mark is instrumental in running along with a team, and has funded some really exciting, genuine innovations, things that no one else is doing. And so we're delighted to have Mark on the panel and sharing his views. And then, of course, we have Amit Mehra, who's sitting next to me here in a very warm and humid Mumbai. Amit is founder and CEO of Reuters Market Light. Started off life as working within Reuters, somewhere in Canary Wharf in London, until there was a fateful incident, which I'm sure he'll tell us about, when the idea was born for Reuters Market Light, which took him on a whirlwind of a journey across continents. He's now here in Mumbai, spearheading this very exciting initiative, which, again, he'll talk about. But in a nutshell, Reuters Market Light provides information at a very low cost to farmers in the field, information about their crop price, information about the weather that they can directly use in order to farm more productively and more commercially. I was sitting in the RML lobby just an hour ago, and there was I saw a story which was hanging up on the wall by and it's just a testimonial by a farmer. I thought I'd read it out to you. The farmer said, his name is Giraj Sharma from Rajasthan. He said, I earned an additional 40,000 rupees selling 100 bags of mustard when the price was on the rise. I earned the additional profit after receiving a text message from RML that said the prices were expected to rise in the coming days. I sold the stock a few days later at 2,600 rupees per bag, an increase of 400 rupees a bag in just 2 days. Had I sold it a few days earlier, the prices were raining at about 2,250 a bag when I received this message. Mr. Sharma, who none of us has probably ever met, is one of the 1 million farmers who are better off as a result of this idea that Amit had and found a way to make happen. And the statistics say that farmers, on average, each of them have additional annual profits of $4,000 US as a result of using this tremendous service, which came as a spark of inspiration to Amit a few years ago up in Canary Wharf. So it's a joy to have you both and to be able to speak to you both. Amit, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay, and just, if you can maybe tell our audience your story as Intrapreneur. Where did it all begin?
Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction. Very, very kind of you and very generous words, Milan. My pleasure to be here. The story really began with an idea that was not really mine, an idea that came from a colleague of mine, a tall Swedish guy who had come up with this one-page document at that time called Project Market Light that he had spent developing at Stanford, which was a program sponsored by Reuters at that time. And he was looking to find a way in which this could be picked up by the company in a more systematic manner and could be given the right budget and management bandwidth to see if it could be a commercial opportunity. And it so happened that at that time, Reuters was putting together, akin to I think what Mark is running at the moment in Barclays, an innovation program, which was overseen by the CEO of Reuters and a few board members. And this gentleman came up to me and said, look, I've got this idea and I'm looking for people who could pick it up. He had a very nice pitch. He said, I'm looking for a boss to actually take it up and perhaps experiment with this in India or in other parts of Africa. And I started giving him names of people that I knew who could help him in taking this to the next logical stage, given that I was doing something completely different at that time, sitting in Canary Wharf. And I had just finished one assignment setting up a joint venture for a television in India, Times Now, as it is called, you may have come across, and had gone back to still working out of Canary Wharf office, but doing back and forth between India and Mumbai and London, and was working on overseeing the transformation of the quality of Reuters content operations across the world. So we were looking at a strategy and quality improvement project for Reuters. So it had nothing to do with farmers.
Very much the core business.
Very much the core business. It was sort of connected with the media business of Reuters and the content operations of Reuters, the heart of what Reuters was known for before it became Thomson Reuters. And nothing to do with mobile phones, nothing to do with farming, nothing to do with retail business that we have ended up becoming in India. But long story short, the conversation was really interesting, and I was somehow again contacted after months. This gentleman had gotten in touch with me by the innovation program of Reuters, and I decided to give it a go, given that that one-page idea really said that there is information asymmetry that exists in agriculture markets across emerging countries, particularly in India and the continent of Africa. And now there is an accessible and affordable device on which the right information could be provided, i.e. the mobile phone. And what Reuters has done globally in the financial markets, this could be done in the agriculture market and create a positive social impact while making this a commercial business opportunity. That was it really. So it didn't really talk too much about what the product will be, processes, the operating model, business model, etc. It was an appealing one. So that's how the journey began. Briefly, it was, when I look back, I break them into three phases. The first phase was getting the funding from the Reuters board.
How long ago was it? When was that paper handed to you in Canary Wharf?
So this was quite a while ago. The first conversation that I had with Mons was somewhere towards the end of 2006, early 2007. And so towards 2006. And then I was doing my day jobs, so didn't really think about getting out, and then picked it up as the conversations happened between various parts of my current team and the innovation program. So I was pulled out of my current job, and I took it as a 3-month assignment really at that time, saying, well, let's see, let's get the first round of funding. So we got the seed funding on the back of that one-pager, which we sort of developed into about a 5-pager, put some market sizing on it, put some ideas around how this could be converted into a business opportunity, begged, borrowed and stole sort of resources from whatever was available, and pitched it to the venture board of Reuters and got £100,000 to start it.
Right.
And that's when the journey began. So phase one was really all about coming to India, spending a lot of time understanding the ecosystem, understanding farming better, meeting with farmers, meeting with telecom players because this was going to be on mobile phones, meeting with the government, the NGOs, about 50, 60 meetings in the first, say, couple of months itself. And then the project really started. It was still a project. Phase 1 was largely about project. For about a year of doing that, the business plan was constructed to give Reuters, and the process of business plan also involved going back to the venture board, asking for funding every 3 to 6 months. And it came to a stage where I was convinced that this is a business that we must launch in India. It has still not quite sure what the product will look like exactly, and how the process will look like to build it and on a consistent basis, and what the business model will be. But we still were confident on paper and based on the research that it will fly. So I got the funding from Reuters, and the CEO was always involved in that conversation, and we launched the business in India towards the end of 2007. That happened. It was still, I would say, phase 1, where the business is formally launched, moved from project to sort of the second part of phase 1, I would say, from a project to an actual operation on the ground. Having done that for a couple of years in India, I moved to India, started to build this from ground up. I realized that in my journey as an intrapreneur in a large company, given the changes that were happening in Reuters, especially with Reuters having got acquired by Thomson, and a lot of priorities changing in the core company, it made sense for me to branch out with the business and make it a fully entrepreneurial venture.
Right.
And I'll talk more about what led to that, but that was kind of second phase, and that went for nearly 2 years, and I started pitching this business opportunity, which had at that time reached now about 1.3 million farmers. We were in about 70,000 villages. We had touched about 5 million farmers, and yeah, some of these statistics that you mentioned were coming as examples from the field. So that was phase 2, went for 2011 to 2013, early 2013, where we were trying to get it out and find the right governance and home for it. And then phase 3 has just begun this year,
right,
where now Reuters Market Light is known as RML Global. Reuters Market Light is still the brand name we use for the product. Reuters has put in another round of funding. We have raised venture capital money from a financial VC, and now building the team properly and scaling the business to reach many more millions of farmers and also the rest of the agriculture value chain. So phase 1, started the business, launched it. Phase 2, tried to transition it out of Reuters. It took 2 years, and phase 3, it's a separate entrepreneurial company.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I'd love to explore with you, I guess each of those phases, and also I guess the transition from between those phases, and the challenges that you encountered. Mark, are you just want to check in that you're there?
Yeah, still here, Milan.
Okay, Mark. So before we go into and explore Amit's story a bit more, I just thought maybe now would be a good time to bring you into the conversation, and maybe if you could share some of the story of SIF and perhaps the story of some of the intrapreneurs that SIF has been supporting.
Yeah, certainly, and thanks also, Milan, for the introduction. I think it's great to have this opportunity to talk about the Social Innovation Facility in Barclays, where we still see ourselves very much as a pilot, testing different types of solutions and interventions. So we're on the journey as well. We certainly don't have all the answers, but we're quite we're always pleased to share these the learnings that we have so far. So why don't I just kind of start by perhaps setting out some of the context behind what we're trying to achieve with the Social Innovation Facility and how we came about. That might just set up the next stage of the conversation, if that works.
Really?
So as Milan said, I head up the Social Innovation Facility in Barclays. For those that don't know Barclays that well, we are a huge global financial services company. We have a business in, I think, over 50 countries around the world, right from retail banking up to investment banking, with everything in between, from credit cards and payments processing to corporate banking and wealth management. So we're a huge business, and this was a facility that we launched last year with a commitment, as Milan said, of £25 million. And this is really looking to drive innovation within our business that will deliver the commercial solutions right within our core business that address social challenges. And this idea came about actually off the back of a strategy review within our traditional CSR team, so our community investment team, which is where I worked at the time. This was a couple of years ago now. So my role within the community investment team, this was the team that was coordinating Barclays charitable donations, was to look after the strategy, the financing, the reporting, and the measurement of impact. And I got involved in a strategic review looking at how we can increase both the social impact of our community investments and our business impact. And I think for those people on the phone that have been involved in CSR or corporate community investment for a while will recognise, I think, that as a profession, everyone has been moving towards this realisation that actually you have most effectiveness through your CI by closely aligning with what you do as a business. So for example, a bank like Barclays, we would be looking at how we could develop financial education programs or financial inclusion programs through our CSR strategy. So really the Social Innovation Facility was just the kind of the next step on from there, really, I suppose, and that actually if we look at this, we have the most impact is always going to be through our core business. I mentioned we had this huge business, 50 countries. I think we've been around for about 320 years. We have 140,000 employees. If we can find a way of tapping into those resources, all that expertise and all those networks of our business to tackle some of these huge challenges facing society, then we can really have a huge impact in the world. So that's what we're trying to achieve with the Social Innovation Facility. It's all about finding the commercial solutions, wrapping a business model around those solutions, and driving social impact through our business. Now, the great thing about that, obviously, is if you have a business model around it and it's making money for Barclays, it's the commercial solution, then the whole solution becomes scalable and self-sustaining. You're not relying on grant funding or subsidies. Your solution itself is hugely scalable. So that's where we're looking to go with this. So in fact, Barclays obviously still has a huge community investment program. We have, I think, about $100 million a year through our charity partnerships. So really effective partnerships. But we see the Social Innovation Facility as an add-on to that and something we're doing alongside the traditional CSR. So with Barclays, the Social Innovation Facility, I see it as kind of an accelerator or an incubator, if you like, for innovation within the business. Now, this type of innovation that's required to really tackle some of these social challenges is going to require long-term thinking, the ability to test new business models, adapt a flexible approach to product development, drive new insights, ways of working. And these aren't things that necessarily come naturally to any business. I think it's fair to say, especially in banking, we've been pretty much doing things the same way for hundreds of years. So the Social Innovation Facility, the idea is that we can come in, we can be there as a resource that our teams can draw on across the business and incubate and accelerate those innovations that's going to be required to really start to drive those commercial solutions. So we have this £25 million in funding. We also have a governing council that we've made up of senior leaders from right across Barclays, who will act as our sponsors and provide air cover for teams that are developing these solutions. And we developed a series of investment criteria of infrastructure that we use to assess how we invest that funding resource across Barclays. So I thought I'd just kind of set out how we do that because it helps to set in context, I think, what it is we're trying to achieve. So the first thing we look at is, what this as proposals come into the facility for funding, we look at the social impact that they will achieve. So how will this proposal drive a sustained social impact? How do we demonstrate that? How do we measure that? How do we identify the individual communities and groups that we're looking to impact through this product, and how does that become sustainable? The second thing is the business value. So like any other innovation or change project, we'd look at the payback periods, the hurdle rates in terms of returns on investment. How would it drive new revenues for Barclays, reduce our costs, drive new stakeholder relationships, brand value, open up new markets for us. Client connectivity is a huge one. There's lots of opportunities in this particular shared value space for working in new ways for partners and clients. And the third thing we look at is the scalability. So it's quite easy to do nice one-off projects through the business, but actually if we're really going to have impact, these things need to be scalable. We need to be able to take these solutions. They need to be able to to pay for themselves, to stand on their own 2 feet from a revenue point of view, and be scaled across existing markets, new markets, and different parts of the business. And then finally, we we look for how it aligns strategically with our business. So if we support something through the Social Innovation Facility that is a complete tangent to Barclays' business strategy in that region, then as soon as our support will disappear, because we see ourselves as the bridging finance, we're not going to be there forever, these things have to be owned by businesses, then they will tend to fail. So we make sure that these things, anything we support is fully aligned with the business strategy of that particular unit that's going to be driving this. So we have around, I think we've invested about £9 million of the 25 so far. The 25 million is a commitment that we've made publicly to invest up to the end of 2015. So we're on track to meet that target, and I think we have about 12 investments in our portfolio at the moment, and I can come on to talk about some of those shortly. But I'll look pause there, Milan, for you to kind of let me know if I've covered off the context or anything else you want me to speak.
And actually, I was going to, before I come back into to Amit and exploring some of the challenges that he faced in these kind of three chapters of RML Global so far. Mark, tell me a little bit about some of the projects you funded. Are there any in there which you're particularly fond of, which tell a real good story? Any of the 12?
Yeah, there's probably all of the 12 I'm quite fond of. But I'll pick up one in Uganda, a partnership that we have with Barclays Bank in Uganda, the Grameen Foundation, and Care International. So Barclays has actually this is quite a good example because it shows how we're taking our expertise from our community investment world and applying them to our business world. So we have an existing community investment partnership with Care and Plan called Banking on Change that some people might be aware of. I think it actually was part of our business call to action commitments a couple of years ago, which is as I say, it's a traditional CSR partnership, so it's actually a donation from Barclays to Care and Plan, and we are working with those partners to set up informal village savings and loans associations in, I think, 6 countries now. And already through the first phase of that, we had reached over 500,000 people, and these would be people that come together on a weekly or a monthly basis as a community savings group, and without the intervention of any banks, they would actually save money themselves amongst their own group, and then once they have enough cumulative savings, they can start to make small loans to each other. It's a really effective model that's been in operation for many years, and Barclays is seeing this as a way for us to start to impact on financial inclusion, and it's a pretty successful partnership. Social Innovation Facility came into the equation in Uganda and say, how can we start to have more impact here and make this a more sustainable solution, and look at how we can start to link these village savings and loan associations from the informal financial services sector, so just being an informal community group meeting once a week, into the formal system, the formal structure, and see this as a good route to get people from out of community savings and into the formal system. So we are working with Barclays Bank in Uganda and Care, who are in Uganda and Grameen, to start to develop the business models, reduce the cost of the new channels and the mobile technology that's going to be required to really kind of reach out to these rural communities and find ways of linking them up into the banking infrastructure. And that also enables us then to offer savings accounts for groups, so they can start to keep their savings safe. There's quite a few concerns in many of these groups around the safety and security of their group savings pot. There's huge amounts of money in their boxes of savings at certain points in the cycle. And we're also enabling them to link into credit facilities in Barclays. So at particular times in their cycles, these groups, for example, near harvest time or early in the cycle when there's not enough savings in the box, they need to be able to access additional credit at particular times in the year. So Barclays are working with our partners Care and Grameen to look at how we can start to offer additional credit facilities into these groups when they need it. So that's quite a nice example because, for Barclays, we have been, I think, in some countries in Africa for over 100 years, and yet still, up to 80% of people across Africa don't have access to mainstream financial services. Now that won't be a challenge that's solved by building bank branches and through traditional business models. It's going to be these new types of collaboration, partnering with organisations such as Grameen, who can spend, I think they've spent so far in our partnership, something like 500 days out in the field in these rural communities. They're really understanding the behaviours that drive the financial lives of these potential customers of Barclays, and building solutions that are informed by that really deep consumer insights. And it's also going to be new collaborations with mobile network operators and technology partners started developing the different types of channels for reaching these customers. So that's a nice example I like because it kind of brings in the links to both partners in the NGO space, so accessing their insights and their ability to really kind of spend that time in the field understanding our customers, but also from a technology point of view, the new types of investments in channels that we're going to need to do to be able to make these things commercially sustainable and scalable. And I could talk for half an hour about another 12 of these things, so I'll pause there.
It's wonderful. Look, it's wonderful to hear. So, just so that maybe for some of our audience who may not be familiar with these VSLAs, what we're talking about here is, within rural communities, there are groups of people who, for generations, have come together and they save money. That whatever they earn, it's given to someone in the community that they trust. And they put it away, and that money is kept in a safe place, buried somewhere, kept in someone's house. And so there are, I don't know if you've got any research on this, but approximately how much money is saved in that kind of informal structure?
Well, it's huge amounts of money. It's millions of dollars across the continent. I think the individual savings per person from the phase 1 of our partnership was $58 per person, which to me and you might not sound a huge amount, but it's a lot of money in the context of types of customers we're reaching here.
Yeah, and times by however many million people there are in the market, or billion people there are in the market. So what I'm getting at is from your perspective, this is an untapped market for you. This is a market which you have which not only has Barclays not been able to access, but no mainstream financial institution has been able to effectively access this market up until now. Right?
Exactly that, and for that reason, Barclays is seen in Africa as a premier bank. We don't see, many people don't see us as relevant to their needs and wouldn't see themselves as a customer of Barclays. So it's quite rewarding now for, when I get a chance to go out and see these projects in action and sit down with our teams locally to actually, go out into the field and see our customers as people who, value Barclays and see Barclays as relevant to them. And have a bank account with Barclays. It's amazing to see it. And this is the same Barclays that I'm sat here today in Canary Wharf in London, looking out over the city, and it's amazing to think that we can do both this huge kind of global financial services offer, but at the same time develop products and services that are relevant to people living on less than $2 a day, and then find a way of doing that in a way which is going to be commercially sustainable and scalable.
Well, absolutely, and I guess this is the thing which I personally find so inspiring about this whole space is that, the people who, like you and the other guys that you've been working with that are driving forward these projects, and I know that this one in particular, am I right, this was one of the first that you funded, right, through the CIF?
Through the Social Innovation Facility, yes. Actually, the Banking on Change partnership with Care and Plan, which actually creates the VSLAs in the first place, has been going since 2008, so that's been going for a few years. But the Social Innovation Facility, which is driving those linkages into the formal financial services infrastructure, first started out about 18 months ago with Grameen. Right.
And I know, having spoken to you in the past about this, that this is something that you're personally, you care a lot about. As you said, you care a lot about all of them, but I know that you do this, and you're doing it because it's something that you believe in and that you care about, and it's, I guess it's personally fulfilling in that it's making a difference. And I think the thing that I find so, as I said, so inspiring about this is that, it's creating wealth, and it's about, Barclays is the right people to be doing this. This is not a charitable endeavor. This is a business endeavor. I was with one of the guys at Marks & Spencer a little while ago, who heads up their he used to head up their Plan A within Marks & Spencer, and he said to me, look, the next 15 years of innovation are not going to look like the last 15 years. And what are they going to look like? We don't know. But this area where we're tapping into people who find it fulfilling to be making a positive impact, to have it make a difference, and to frame that as an opportunity for business innovation. There are some very, very interesting, exciting things emerging from that. I guess the other thing is while it's exciting and while it's inspiring, I think it's also frustrating and difficult and hard. I think innovation always is. You have to, you fail and you learn from those failures. And I guess that kind of brings me on to the next topic that I wanted to explore with both of you, which is what are the challenges that you guys have faced? And maybe I'll turn to Amit here. Let's look at the 3 chapters of RML Global, the challenges that you faced in each one, and also in the transition from chapter 1 to 2 and 2 to 3.
Sure. Let me just start with the context of these of this space.
Okay.
And I think within that, the challenges, both external and internal, perhaps become easier to relate to. So we are talking about creating a positive social impact in areas, certainly in the example that Mark gave about people not having access to formal channels of banking, or in our case, farmers who did not have access to the right information at the right time that could be relied upon and was consistently available. Not being available to them was leading to lower, very, very low productivity levels, not realization of the right price for their produce, much of it being swindled away by the middleman community, leading to all sorts of emotional distress because they're not able to stand up to the middlemen who have access to information and therefore control a large part of and appropriate a large part of the value that farmers should rightly own. Now, these are problems, such problems, certainly in the area of agriculture in India, are inherently difficult to solve. The government has been trying to do it for the last 50, 60 years and have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on an annual basis to create a solution that provides what the farmers need to know at the right time. And they have not succeeded. And therefore, India remains still the only country with 600 million people dependent on agriculture, directly or indirectly, and contributing only 15% to the GDP. Some of the lowest levels of productivity, despite having some of the highest levels of production overall, given the landmass. So number one is that the problems that we are trying to solve are inherently difficult. Right. Number two, we want to make it a sustainable proposition, i.e. profitable. Now, anybody who has tried to build a business, to create a product, a service, build a team, get the funding, get the operating model right, business model right, all of them are in itself are very, very challenging things to do. Yeah. So you're trying to do two very difficult things at the same time. Thirdly, you're trying to do it in a large company. Right. You're trying to do it in a company which has its own set of processes, priorities, incentive programs, technology platform, ecosystem around it, and you have to deal with that as well. So the whole area of social innovation, of creating businesses that have positive social impact, is really an overlap of these 3 circles.
And not for the faint-hearted.
And not for the faint-hearted. So before you venture into this space, sometimes, one doesn't realize. I certainly did not when I started, as we were discussing earlier on. You figure it out as you go along and you realize, oh my gosh, this is difficult because we are trying to do something that has been, nobody else has been, even the civil society or other companies have not been able to resolve. And if I may add, the 4th dimension, first is inherently difficult. Right. Second is that it's a startup innovation, so it has its own set of challenges that are applicable to innovation around the world in any sector, any industry. And then we want to make it, we're doing it in a large company. Right. The 4th dimension is, as Mark also mentioned, we want to make it scalable. Right. So you don't want to do it as a small project. You want it to be scaled across the country, hopefully across many countries, impact millions of people. Very, very challenging external context, right? And internal, given the fact that you are in the governance framework of a large company. Now, why should a large company still do it? Right. The question is, why should a Barclays or a Reuters or any other company, that is part of the BCTA, should attempt to do it? Because there's a belief that the resources, assets, skills, let's say the set of capabilities that large companies have, much of it in the people and their desire to make an impact, can be leveraged, and it could become potentially a big opportunity. So that could be leveraged, and you harness that, the spirit that people have to make a positive impact in the world, and could do it in a way that becomes sustainable and scalable. So I think large companies should absolutely still venture into this space despite all these challenges that are there in the context. But The challenges that I faced, given that this is the context in which we are operating, perhaps are some of the lessons that I can convert them into lessons, and that might be helpful to the audience, is that because all of these things exist, it will take a long time for the answer to emerge. What will be the product or service? What will be the distribution model? What will be the overall operating model, technology platform, channels, ecosystem, all of that. So product, your operating model, and then what will be the business model in which you will consistently make money, therefore not rely on internal funding or external funding. It will take a long time, and it took us a very long time. You know, we got the product wrong, we got the operating model wrong, we got the product and operating model right after about a year and a half, and then we scaled to 13 states, but it took us a very long time to get the business model right. And only when we got that right, you know, while we were getting that right, a lot of things changed within the large company, a lot of things.
Right.
So the first thing is the challenge of having the right, the same, I won't even say the right, I think the first challenge was to having the same set of people continue in that journey that the Intrapreneur or I was taking and my team was taking at that time, to remain with us along that journey for long enough time for us to figure out these 2 or 3 things.
Okay.
Yeah. So you know, my rule of thumb is, you know, at least 2 to 3 years, not less than that, because I did see a lot of such ventures also starting in Reuters around the same time. The decisions on those were taken much quicker, much earlier than they should have been taken, right. And you know, they didn't really go too far. So the council that I think Mark spoke about, and similarly we had a board as well that was overseeing this. I think that structure changed much faster, and therefore what you end up doing, and that's challenge number 1, that you keep spending a lot of time as a person trying to solve those difficult things, build a scalable business, trying to do it, you know, innovation on the ground, spending a lot of time educating internally as to why the hell you're doing what you're doing.
Right.
And that takes a lot of management bandwidth and energy that you would rather spend on the problem and the business.
So let me just interrupt you, and so if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is that because what you were building did not have a natural home, or even the home that was created for it, which was the innovation board or innovation group, because that itself was new, the people in there were changing. Yeah. These very practical problems of, while having the same challenges that any entrepreneur has, of building a business, to any entrepreneur going into this space, which is solving problems which people have not really been able to solve yet. So that's hard enough, but I guess your internal environment, the specific thing you're saying is that, you know, just having to have the conversations with guys as to, well, this is why we're doing it, and this is why it's valuable, this is why it's worth it, and then 6 months later, he moves on somewhere else, a new guy comes in, and you've got to do the whole thing again, and constantly have, so, okay, so, well, fine, I mean, I guess these
that's consistency of people.
Right.
I wouldn't even say that it is about the structure that you give to this project or the initiative. I think that comes a little later.
Right.
Because you start with a certain set of assumptions about your capabilities that will be relevant in the market. Like in our case, we thought that the content that Reuters creates for the commodity markets in India would be relevant for the farming community.
Right.
Wrong. We had to create it from scratch. Now we have 400 people creating content for farmers on a daily basis. All of that goes back to Reuters, in fact, because that just didn't exist. So assumption was wrong. The second assumption that we could just put our content on the back of the mobile phone operators and do a revenue deal, therefore we don't have to get into selling directly to the farmers. Wrong. The deal never structured, never materialized, for a variety of reasons that we explored by doing multiple partnerships, but it just didn't fly. So we actually sell through banks. Right. We thought that we could just put the content for a relevant village or a particular district onto a mobile phone and give to all the farmers. Did not work at all. We had to, we're now the world's most personalized service. So each farmer gets everything that he needs to know 3 to 4 times in a day on an SMS in his local language as per his individual preferences across these, 1.3 million farmers over the last 5 years. So all those assumptions were proven wrong, but not on day one. Right. They were proven wrong as we executed on the ground. Sure. That meant that it had implication on the financial plan, implication on the business plan, implication on the hiring plan, implication on the partnership strategy. Everything that was put out of that one pager in the first round changed Now imagine when you're going through that change, the people that you're having conversations with internally also change. Now, if they change over a period of 2 years to 3 years, it's long enough for you to have figured out some of the assumptions. But if they change too fast, then you're spending a lot of time in educating and aligning people internally. So that's one of the big challenges. Second is the right mix of skills on the governing part as well. So you need to be able to build a business, to have the right support from people within your industry that you're trying to address, perhaps some technology support, you need to have some functional support, you need to have people who have probably been connected with that field, like in our case, farming, agriculture, rural, mobile. If you don't have those set of skills, because they're just not available within the company, although there are certain capabilities you're using, but they're not that core anymore as you have learned along the journey. So I think the second part is the right level of, right mix of skills, which is the second challenge that I faced when I compare myself to the other entrepreneurs out there. And the third one was, commitment to funding. And that's also very difficult in large companies because they go through the annual budgeting cycle. Now, you don't want to spend a lot of time because while the metrics that you are you have sort of signed up to are delivering the right results, they are progressing well, but your journey is stopped because a large company is not able to fund this overall initiative because something else has happened in some other part of the world. So I think these three were the big internal challenges which took a lot of my energy and time, which frankly I do not have to face now. Now that I'm in phase 3,
and you've spun off.
We've spun off. Now the governance is the right set of skills on the board. We have the right, the same people who will stay with us for at least 3 to 5 years. We have a commitment to the funding that is signed off, and if we do deliver on the plan that we have signed up to, then that stays. In fact, that even grows if you need to scale up in other countries. So those were the first thing, and I've always, whenever I have a chance to talk to, aspiring entrepreneurs, that spend some time in sorting these 2 or 3 things out first before you take the bigger challenges of solving inherently difficult social problems and trying to build a business or an opportunity, commercial opportunity around it.
Well, absolutely, and I'm sure that at the time in phase 1 of Reuters Market Light, when it was still that, these were not the things that were front of mind.
Not at all. I just, found them along the journey and realized, somebody did mention that to me in the beginning, and now I know what the right governance means. Now I know what the right commitment means, and now I know what the right skill set on the board means, which I did not really care about when I started this. Thinking that all I need is a management team on the ground, some funding for 1 year, and I'll do it. It just didn't work out that way.
Mark, I'm keen to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, Amit saying 3 things that he found. Number 1 was a shift in the senior stakeholders and a kind of constantly shifting environment, because I guess it was an environment that was kind of being created as RML was being created. It wasn't an established structure. And I guess that is the nature of these kinds of innovations, are that it requires a company to step outside of its comfort zone. And companies, like people, are not very good at stepping outside of their comfort zone.
Despite the best intentions, I must add.
Exactly. So 1, change in people. 2, the skills mix. I guess Reuters, the core business. Maybe Reuters Market Light started off as being a kind of core business add-on, but it very quickly became something quite different and quite unique. And do the guys who are in your governing structure know about mobile technology, know about farming, know about, as you were saying? And 3, as you said, the commitment to funding. Mark, what are your views on this? I guess, I mean, in some ways, you're kind of on the other side of the table, right? You're kind of the one who has to make...
I mean, it's interesting listening to Amit speak. I mean, we would recognise all of those things, and the role of the Social Innovation Facility in Barclays is actually to look at those barriers and the same things we recognise that you've just outlined there, and say how can we, as a Social Innovation Facility, put in place a package of support and a series of levers that we can help introduce to overcome some of those barriers. And doing social innovation in any large business is, you will face all the same barriers as doing any type of innovation. Changing in businesses is difficult, and it's a hard process to see through to the conclusion. I think the fact it's social innovation only magnifies those things. So, Milan, you'll remember the Intrapreneur Lab back in, I think, October, one of the first speakers we had on the agenda was Samani from Cornell. And he said, his whole session was kind of set out about how not to get bucketed as a CSR project. And for these things to work, you have to avoid becoming, bucketed as a CSR project, because that's, just too easy to switch on and off at different points in time, depending on the priorities of the day. So, we kind of recognise all those things, and the role of the facility is to look at how we're going to become those. The other thing I think I would add to the three you've outlined already is, obviously, short-termism and competing priorities are all huge challenges, and funding is related to that. So you can only get funding for something if it's going to pay back within the current quarter or the current year. That's the focus. But things like organisational design can be hugely enabling or disabling when it comes to social innovation. So in fact, just last Friday at Barclays, we had our first SIF Hangouts session here in London, which is just an informal space for people to come together. There's no job titles, no hierarchies, there's no kind of virtual forums. It's just come together in a physical space and talk to people. We invited people along to a part of the building here in London that is quite a cool space. It's quite informal. Have a coffee, meet people who are interested in understanding a bit about social innovation. People have a real passion for certain social impact areas, and just talk to them, understand what they do, understand what their interest is, and join up. And there's a lot of that which we can do as a facility, that networking, that identifying best practice and sharing it, and joining up the dots across the business. When you're such a huge business like Barclays, that can be really powerful. And then the other thing we can do is incubate our project teams from a lot of that business process. And we obviously have to work within certain rules and things, but when in Barclays we have this thing called new product approval processes, which I'm sure every business has, and they're there for a very good reason. We're, as an organisation, we need to be very tight on our controls. Business generally is quite risk averse, so these things are there in place for a good reason. But when you're trying to do this type of innovation, you need to have this rapid iteration approach. You need to be able to test lots of different models, fail fast and fail quickly, and then change and try something different. And we don't have that in business. Generally we have a low tolerance of failure across business. No one's going to put their hand up in a business meeting and say, yeah, I've tried this, it didn't work. Everyone wants to be associated with the successes. So we're trying to incubate ourselves from all those kind of standard business processes just throughout that development cycle. Allow us to test things. Let's try some new things, see what works and what doesn't work. And then once it's been proven, we can build a really strong business case for it, and then start to knit it back into the fabric of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, as you're speaking, I was just remembering Nick Hughes of M-Pesa telling us when we were together there in Oxford, Mark, that because he had that £1 million grant from DFID, he was kind of ignored. So he was just left to get on with it, and he was saying that he allowed himself to fail. I think he said, 18 times? I think
the other thing he said, Milan, which I thought was really interesting, was, and obviously he worked at Vodafone at the time, he said if we had been thinking like a bank, we would never have developed M-Pesa. It's the fact that they were not bankers, they weren't experts in financial services, that they were able to come up with this completely different solution, right? And sometimes expertise in a particular sector and established business models and understanding in a real detailed level how banks work isn't helpful to innovation. You need to be able to think completely differently, a complete different set of kind of environments and barriers. So I think that was quite interesting as well to hear him say that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
If I may add to that,
please.
You're absolutely right that even in RML, the only person, and at many times I used to tell the team, the only liability you have from Reuters is me, because everybody else in the team over time had come from outside.
Sure.
They were people who had brought in skills from retail, from FMCG, from mobile phone, from lot from farming. A lot of my team members had families connected with farming, and I think that really helped us create this personalized service. And one of the guys who had come from the Unilever world just said, why are we trying to sell through the operators if they're not buying in, not giving us the right revenue share, we don't have visibility? Why don't I just go and sell directly to a retailer, through a distributor? I said, are you sure? We've never done that. I said, yeah, of course, here's the margin structure, I think I can try it. And that's the model that we have built.
And where did that idea come from? From him?
From him, just in one off conversation in the evening in Bangalore office, which I was still visiting from London.
Right.
And he just said, look, on the back of the envelope, really literally on the back of some, pad, he said, this is what we can try. Why are we, constantly following the assumption that you have made sitting in London, sure, that this is how we will do it because we are Reuters and we'll do a deal with, an operator. And it made perfect sense, in our analysis. And there was positive vibe that we were getting from the operators. But in reality, it just didn't work on the ground when you go to the CEOs of the various states. So I agree with that, that point that you need fresh ideas and fresh skills and experiences very different to the core company sometimes to, spur that innovation that is needed.
Absolutely. And I guess what I'm hearing is that, this to me is fundamentally entrepreneurial behavior. An entrepreneur, fails as many times as it takes until he gets it right because he hasn't got a choice. Yeah. You've got to figure it out, otherwise you're not going to put food on the table. And while the intrapreneur has the clout of his company, it's something, look, we know it does. It does stifle this entrepreneurial spirit unless the individual says, I'm going to find a way because I believe in my idea, and if I don't, my idea will never see the light of day. Look, I think the three of us could speak all day long on this. We've got another half an hour. I'm going to request, we've already got one question coming in, and I'm going to request our audience, if you have any questions for our final half an hour, please just send them through on the chat function, and we'll try and get through as many of them as possible. The first question that we've got so far is from Karen. She's asking me, or asking us about the internal barriers to the project, which coincidentally is actually the final point that I wanted us to explore. You talked about some of the external challenges, internal barriers. And interestingly, I don't know what Karen means by internal. When she says internal to the company or internal to you as the human being? Maybe let's choose to interpret it as internal to you as a human being, because I'm keen to explore that.
Sure, absolutely. And I think internal to the company were really about this getting the right governance, right. And then we could go on even structural issues that came about and were very pertinent, and hence we did the spin out because we were not fitting into the right org design of the company. But I think the internal to me and to my team, I would say, because obviously I was relying hugely on the team that was a lot smarter than I am, and clearly got a lot of things in shape while I was still spending my management bandwidth internally. It's a very, very difficult position to be in. Very, very difficult position to be in. I used to say this, share this analogy with some of my potential investors when I would go and pitch. And this is, having Reuters along with me in those pitches, because Reuters was very clear that this is still a big business opportunity, but it'll take time. And this is not the right home for you, only home for you. We would still fund it, but we want it to be we want you to have the freedom and flexibility to do it. In a startup environment would be best. So the analogy that I would share with the investors would be that I feel like that I'm competing in Olympics swimming competition with a suit on, rather than in the proper swimming gear, or I'm playing cricket with a broken bat. I see all these startups out there, which are really doing well, and they are obviously making mistakes. They're obviously learning from it. They are getting it wrong again and again, but they have the freedom and flexibility to do that. I sometimes, and my team, we all feel, even to attract the right talent, I don't have the best story to give at the moment because I'm still finding my home, my corporate home. One of the VCs, very well-known VC in the Silicon Valley, wouldn't want to name them, but they said, oh, so you're a corporate orphan. You're a corporate orphan, because you're, and really, so it was very, very difficult. That was a very, difficult emotionally to deal with.
How did you feel?
And you always have an option, a choice to, I don't want to go through with this, for so long. I've given it a good shape, it has created good impact, lots of, awards, etc. Reuters got a lot of, the branding, I would say, and some talent out of this, but I may not have got financial returns. So let me continue with my corporate job and go back or do something else. And that's a very hard one. It's a very hard one to answer. So I think the biggest one was to figure out where do I want to grow, and for my team. And my team took a call as well. All 400 people came along with me, almost all 400, to this other side. And most importantly, my leadership team said, no, we believe we're doing something good, and we believe that we can make it large, mega profitable, and we will only figure out whether we can or cannot, our belief is right or not, once we create the right conditions. So let's move up. So that was one of the biggest challenges. It was very frustrating during that time to answer myself the question, where do I sit? And where should I sit? Yeah.
And before we started, I asked you the question, do you feel that particularly like all the challenges, the challenges of the product, that's a difficult problem to solve.
Yeah.
Number two, that all the challenges that you listed out, the kind of external challenges, as well as the challenges of handling the internal environment, the fact that it was, that the governance structure was constantly changing and a lot of your energy was being sat there. Do you feel that was in some ways necessary for you as an individual? The lessons that you learned from that, do you think they are required for you to be able to take RML to where it needs to go over the next 10 years, 20 years?
Absolutely. And before you asked me this question, I didn't think of it that way. But as I reflected on this earlier on when we were talking, I think it absolutely does, because, and it's probably relevant to a lot of people on the call. We may be in corporates, but many of us work in the non-profit sector, some are in the government, some are in academia. Everybody is looking at this social innovation space.
Sure.
And the solutions, as also came out in the conversation, are going to be multi-stakeholder driven. It will be Barclays working with Grameen and telecom operators. It will be RML working with the government and also, a bank.
Sure.
So one of the things that has benefited me in that dealing with external challenges and internal challenges, and hence highly recommend people who believe in the idea to just persevere, because you don't have all the answers. You can pick up some lessons from the experiences we've had, but persevere, because the skills that you take out are to develop, at least I did, I think, a higher level of empathy with how things get done in large corporates, how to build how to build a new market, a new business, new product in a large company, how to do it as a startup, how to deal with the government, how to deal with the civil society, because we connect with that as well quite a lot. So I think they will help in the scale and growth of RML, but also I think have given me enough, I feel, first-hand feel that I feel that I must share with the others who are planning to embark on a similar journey or in the middle of a journey like this, that is worth going through. When you come out the other side, it does feel it was worth all the effort.
It's worth it.
We're still not got where we want to get to as a commercial opportunity, but we're getting there. I think we have a better chance now to get.
We're on the path, absolutely. Mark, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. And I was just reminded of an insight that we shared at the lab when we were in Oxford together. Sometimes, if you're going on an obstacle course, the purpose of the obstacle course is not to get to the end. The purpose of the obstacle course is to make you strong. And it's only after you've overcome one or two of these obstacles that you actually develop the ability, the strength, the qualities to be able to overcome the others that lay further in our path.
Yeah, that was the thing that came out quite regularly for me as well at the lab, Milan, was this concept of personal resilience being so important to be a successful entrepreneur within a business. And we could see it quite clearly, within all of the examples that we had join us at the lab itself, and I see it here in Barclays as well. So, as I mentioned, this SIF Hangouts event we had last week, you start to recognize an entrepreneur as a kind of breed of person that you have in business who they have this amazing resilience and this amazing capacity to take on this additional work on top of their day job, and that's driven because they're so passionate about a particular social impact area, and they've been able to find something that really drives them deep inside, and they've found this way of addressing that at work through their role in Barclays. And if you can do that, if you can find a way of someone coming to work and not having to leave at home when they leave for work in the morning, their personal passions and drivers, then I think you create something quite powerful, and you can really create some hugely powerful change agents within the business, and they will find ways around these barriers, and they will deliver change, and they will get things done, and they will connect up with people they need to connect up with. They will stay late if they need to stay late, and they will make things happen. And we see this more and more. The people that find us. We in the social innovation facility, we have quite purposely up to now been quite quiet on our communications activity. We wanted to, I'm talking about the internal comms now. We wanted to build up our infrastructure and start to get things in place before we went out of a big bang comms activity internally. But people still find us. These people know where to look. They will come and find us, and they will come to us with their ideas and want to engage, and they're really driven by that personal passion.
Absolutely, and look, I mean, I've said it before many times. It's a credit to you and the other guys at Barclays that you created a place where these guys can go and say, hey, look, I've got this idea, and can you give me some help converting it from an idea which everyone else says is a pipe dream to something which could actually see the light of day. There's a few other questions that are coming in. Let's have a look. Okay, so we've got one from Raphael. How do you overcome apathy amongst, I guess, various stakeholders who you're connecting with, who don't see the things that you see? They don't see the opportunities that you see. I mean, I've got personal experience in this as well. Sometimes, you've got the idea and you're like, why do you not get it? Why do you not see that this is a fantastic opportunity? And maybe they're seeing hazards and obstacles that you're not, which of course we have to be open to, but sometimes they're just not interested, I suppose. The question that's come, for Mark and for Amit, what are any views on that?
From my side, Milan, I mean, certainly you could say working with some of these groups, there's a huge gap between, let's stick with the example we've been using in Uganda with the Green Foundation. So developing products and services for people who have never had access to mainstream financial services, people who have never used, smartphones, for example. There's a huge gap there in understanding, both a kind of physical gap as well. So these guys live 100 miles away from the nearest banking branch, as well as a cultural gap and an understanding gap. So that's where we really do draw on the experience and the insight that we get from our partners, and the Green Foundation are a hugely valuable partner for us in that respect. So they were able to spend, they have this great human-centered design process where they're developing products, but the end users, the customers, if you like, are the ones that are effectively developing it. They spent, I think, something like 52 days in the field on one small mobile phone app that we're developing, which will digitize the transactional records of these informal village savings and loans groups so that they become visible to financial services. And these people, they are saving regularly, they are making loans to each other and paying back those loans, they have financial records, but they're all held on paper in these scrappy notebooks in a box under someone's bed somewhere. So how can we start to digitize all that data and then make that available to the mainstream financial services organizations, and then start to kind of incorporate them into banking. So by working with Grameen and breaking down those barriers, both from a physical distance and a cultural education point of view, we can start to make sure that the products that we develop are relevant to those end users. And when I was actually out in Uganda just a few months ago, I was lucky enough to witness some of or be part of some of these field trips that we go on with Grameen, where we can actually witness their process at first hand, and they have this process of storyboarding with the end users, of then doing paper prototyping and building an actual app on a mobile phone that they can then test in the field with real customers. And I saw this one afternoon session where we had, I think, 3 or 4 people from the local village savings group there, and this was the first time they'd ever picked up a smartphone in their life. They'd seen mobile phones before, but certainly not smartphones. And within I think it was maybe 2 or 3 minutes. The secretary of the savings group was whizzing around this app, touch screen, as if he had, been using smartphones his entire life. It was designed in such a way that was so obvious and so intuitive because the end users were the people who are involved in designing it. So as business, we can learn a lot from that, and by really staying close to our customers and having customer insights drive our innovation process, we can overcome lots of those gaps and the potential apathy from the end user's point of view, in terms of the lack of awareness about each other's businesses and motivations.
Again, I'm going to ask Amit to comment in a second, but as you were speaking, again, I was thinking of Nick Hughes, and one thing that he said at the lab, which was, I struggle to differentiate social innovation from innovation. If you find a way to serve your customer and provide value to the customer, that's an innovation. In a way which no one else is doing, that's an innovation, and that's the job of business. It's not the job, of civil society. It's not the job of a charity, certainly. It's the job of business. Amit, any thoughts from you on this?
Absolutely, I agree with that. I think the way we summarize this in RML that we use both for internal selling, as we used to do within Reuters, or externally to our client base, many of them not highly educated, some of them not even literate, is the mantra of show, not tell. And as much as we can prototype things, as much as we can show them this is what it does, and give it in their hands to play with, it does the job, whether we are pitching to an enterprise, or whether we're pitching internally, or we're giving it to a farmer. Even internally, I have seen, when we actually show the video, and I remember getting some, third round of funding on the back of some of the anecdotes that we had gathered from the market. So it was not just, me telling them what has happened. I showed them what was happening in the field. Some of them were actually flown from London to spend time in Aurangabad and some of the villages, and when they interacted with the farmers, the way it appealed to me when I first interacted with the farmer, showed them the prototype that we had developed on a mobile phone, and the sparkle in his eyes and the way he called his wife and his son came over and said, this company is planning to give us this info. Show, not tell, is something that has served us quite well, and we continue and highly recommend that. I think that's one way to connect with people who may not very easily empathize with what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And that emotional connection, we're all human beings at the end of the day. You catch someone emotionally. Look, purchasing decisions are made emotionally. Yeah. We may justify them later intellectually, but ultimately, that's the way we work. Look, we've got two final questions that I'd like to take, one from Alyssa and one from Cornetta. Alyssa's question is, when pitching a social innovation project to a multinational, like Reuters or Barclays, what are the most important points to address? We've touched on it already, but maybe we can explore. What are the initial questions that you were confronted with? Well, okay, Mark, what are the questions that you ask, I suppose? And maybe we'll come to Amit.
So when we're pitching to Barclays Social Innovation Facilities, let's not forget this is an internal facility, so we don't have outside organisations coming to us and pitching for funding. It's very much an internal accelerator. So these are Barclays teams, the Barclays businesses coming to us with their ideas. So I talked a bit about our 4 assessment criteria. I think the most important thing is let's make the business case for this. As I mentioned before about Eric's quote at the Intrapreneur Lab, don't get bucketed as CSR, and make a really compelling business case for why this works, why the Barclays should be allocating resources and funding and accelerating this particular innovation. What is the scalability? How does it become a self-sustaining business proposition? And so, some of these social challenges that we could affect through financial services represent huge business opportunities. If we find a way of, to go back to the Africa financial inclusion example, with up to 80% of people in Africa without access to basic bank accounts, we can find a way of reducing the cost for Barclays to serve individuals, reducing the cost for individuals to access our services. Then we can operate commercially and offer our services to huge new markets. And, that's what I kind of always look for, is how does this become a commercially self-sustaining proposition for Barclays? And then obviously, because we're a social innovation facility, we need to be very clear on the social impact and demonstrate how we're going to measure that.
Wonderful. And I'm tempted to ask about measurement of social impact, but I'm not sure I'm ready to open that can of worms 10 minutes before the end of end of the seminar. We've got 2 more questions. Amit, a question for you from Cornetta. Did you find that your innovation bumped against company culture? If so, how do you counteract it? And Cornetta, there is a knowing smile on Amit's face, which you can't see right now.
There is, before even RML began, and the innovation program was put in place in Reuters, there were people that I would come across, because I did work with Reuters at the London office for nearly 7 years before I moved to India, who would have innovative ideas, but they would just not do anything with it, right. And would say that, they don't go anywhere. I share it with people, and they just get bounced around here and there. There's no tangible outcome of that. And I think one exciting and the right thing that Reuters did at that time was to put this structure of the innovation program and a venture board, which allowed ideas which are very different from what the core business at the moment is doing, but could create for the company, and therefore very risky in nature because a lot of the assumptions are untested. They gave it a separate home.
Yeah.
So in one way, I would say the company created the condition to counter anything that would have gone against innovation.
Right.
Yeah? So that structure helped. The interesting thing about that structure was, and I've seen that play out in many companies again and again, some of the friends who have tried to do something similar in large companies, is that the structure was overseen by the final decision makers.
Right.
So an opportunity that may potentially give a $10 million revenue in 4 to 5 years is not of that big an interest if it is full of risks and uncertainty to someone who is going to run a $500 million business or a $1 billion P&L,
sure.
right? It doesn't figure into their
sure.
necessarily into their set of priorities. But then you have the people who are running a $5 billion or $15 billion company and are on the board of that company, and therefore they will take a long-term view
right.
Of the opportunities. They would still see this as, it may be 5 to 10 million in a few years, but it's potentially going to address a 100 million people opportunity, 200
right.
million people opportunity.
In 10 years'
in
time.
10 years' time,
right.
And it will be not easy to do. It will get stifled completely if it has to go somewhere else in the organization. So I think the second good thing was not just to create a separate home, but to have the most senior decision makers, only 3-4 of them. The only problem, which is what I mentioned in the early part of my conversation, is that it wasn't there long enough.
Right.
Something like this has to be long enough. I think the view that Reuters took was that a year and a half was good enough to incubate these things.
Right.
But the context is inherently difficult.
Yeah.
You're building a startup. You want to scale it up. And you want to do it in a sustainable way, it's going to take time. So that's what the company did. And I think as an individual, what one could do, and I think I attempted to do, thanks to my team on the ground in India, who was taking care of a lot of the operational stuff in the early days on their own shoulders, is to connect with a lot of decision makers internally.
Right.
So I think you need to keep educating them. You need to keep going to them. You need to keep having coffees and teas. And I remember some of them commenting, I know this is a waste of your time right now, but this is important for you to do.
Sure.
They themselves realize that this is important. Otherwise, you will get lost in everything else that is going on in the company. You need to keep your voice, ensure that your voice is being heard. So I think that's one of the big things that I think helped in the early days.
Absolutely, and again, I'm reminded, particularly, Mark will remember our session with Marika Macaulay-Sin at Coca-Cola, who was one of the entrepreneurs behind 5x20, Coca-Cola's commitment to empower 5 million women in their supply chain by the year 2020, and how she spoke so much about this. And we were talking about positive politicking, but she didn't really say it as positive politicking. She's like, well, in Coca-Cola there are lots of stakeholders, and I've got to talk to all of them, and I've got to get them all on board, and I've got to get in front of them and persuade them.
Yeah.
That's just, if you want to do business in a large company, you've got to do that. You can call it politicking if you want. It's just building relationships. It kind of comes with the territory.
If I may, a very important point add here, that I hugely benefited. At that time, I used to report to the Chief Innovation Officer of Reuters, Amanda West, and I think a lot of this that go and talk to him or her before my funding round and before I would go with a business plan was guided by her.
Right.
So I think having someone like that
right.
who was able to guide the entrepreneur that I was 6 years ago was extremely important.
Yeah.
I probably would have not spent that much time internally building those relationships. And then, within a year I was wiser. So before I moved to India, I went to Tom and, met him directly saying, look, I'm going there, either a CS or a P&L. But I think without that initial support, I probably wouldn't have done that.
Well, absolutely. And this role of the godparent, I think, has been a recurring theme. We've got one final question which I'd like to offer to Mark. In fact, it's a question which I think maybe I misunderstood, but Raphael has repeated it. How would you overcome apathy amongst target vulnerable groups who, due to a low education level, have limited perception of opportunities and options? I think I'd interpreted this as internal stakeholders, but I think what Raphael is saying here is that your market, the individuals, your customers, the farmers, in Amit's case, and I guess let's take the Uganda example, the individuals in those village and savings and loan associations. Mark, what do you think? I mean, if you've been out there, you've been in Uganda, low education level, limited perception of opportunities and options, vulnerable groups. Are you seeing apathy in these people?
I think Milan, I think I'd answered the question Raphael had asked around the vulnerable groups piece, rather than one you perhaps had interpreted it as. Because, I mean, that's what I was trying to say. This is all about using, about involving end users in design of the products, making things that are relevant to them. Really
absolutely, yeah.
And the kind of proof of the success or otherwise of that process and the human-centered design process is the fact that we are, so in Barclays, we're developing this mobile app that savings groups can have on their phone that will digitize their transactional records. Now, we're not providing them with a free phone. We're not providing them with free data to send that app. So for this to work, they have to buy the phone. They have to sit down every group and fill out the app and send the data to the bank. So the fact that they were prepared to do that, and our early pilots are proving very successful, and groups are taking up the offer of this and wanting to know how they can get involved, is proof that this is they understand this, they understand the opportunities, and I think there's some amazing quotes about how they see this as a way for them to come out of the shadows and into the light. From being invisible to banks, this gives them a way of individuals within savings groups having their own personal financial records and data on their financial history that banks can access. So if the user is involved in the design process and your product innovation is driven from consumer insights, then your target audience groups, whilst they might not understand banking, and we certainly don't understand them, so this is a two-way street, the product you design and the outcome of that will be relevant to them because they are the ones designing it themselves.
Exactly, and I guess what you're saying here is people know when something is of value to them, and they'll buy it if it is. And is there apathy amongst them? There may be, but perhaps no more apathy than at any level of the pyramid. There's apathy at the top of the pyramid as well. But if you can get through to your customer by demonstrating that this is of real value to you, and these are fundamental business challenges. You have to communicate. If you're seeing apathy in your customer, either you've got the wrong product or you're not selling it well enough.
Exactly, exactly right.
Where in the pyramid you are.
Right. So if I may just add one more thing, in our experience on this topic is, one, I said that the best way to get them to get rid of that apathy and to connect with what is being offered is to show them value, and best is to show them rather than talk about it. It always works well. I mean, one of the things that I remember when we were asking farmers about their needs, financial services availability or credit availability did not even figure in their top 5 needs, because they had gotten so accustomed to the patchy network and the reliance on the trader or the middleman that didn't even realize that this was a need. They were paying through their nose the high interest rates, and we knew that there was a problem.
Right.
So the second part of it is while you can show rather than tell, and they will see the value in that. There is a problem. There is a problem because of the level of perhaps, I wouldn't say education, but because of so many other distractions and challenges the bottom of the pyramid generally faces.
Yeah.
Even though they see value in that,
Yeah.
you still need to spend enough time and money, I would say, to educate at scale. So you may have to spend 20 minutes even after having given the product to someone to be able to make them realize what value they can drive out of it. Now, if you do that, with each individual farmer, your cost of acquisition is through the roof, so you can't really make a sustainable business. So you have to think in a very clever manner, realizing that the consumer behavior at that level, given all the other distractions, is not going to change as fast.
Sure.
So be prepared that there will be some level of apathy. I mean, even if today I look at the renewal rates that we have, of people who have benefited to the extent of $8,000, $5,000, they still sometimes, because of everything else that is going around them, they need a hand-holding to be able to come and easily renew.
Sure.
So they see this as the terminology we use internally is that our product is a vitamin that increases productivity, increases their price realization, and ultimately is addressing food security and lots of other issues, but it's not an antibiotic.
Right.
If you don't get it right now, it's not that your business is going to go kaput. So I think there is that realization.
And what have you practically done?
So what we have, one of the things that we have done is, in addition to creating these products and leaving with the farmers to use it, and by the way, this data is also born out of the studies that the World Bank has done in other parts of the world, where they said it took 2 to 3 years for farmers to change their behaviors. And we realized that through practice and execution that it is, taking time. So we have then developed that ecosystem. We're working with the banks. So banks are, educating the farmers. The biggest public sector bank, State Bank of India, we are the only product on their core banking solution. So they do a bit of education as they're giving loans out. We've also invested in local promotions. We have most of our workforce is in any case from the local communities. They connect with the farmers very well. So we've had to change the profile of people. We've had to change the partners. We've had to also spend more to ensure. And we believe that we still need to do a lot more of that to be able to get this to tens of millions rather than just 5-6 million that we've got.
Absolutely, and I'm sure none of which you knew when you were
absolutely
in London.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end. I think we could go on and on. For me, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with both Mark and Amit. We hope it's been valuable for you. Interesting, insightful, inspiring. We're here in Bombay at the moment. I was with another Intrapreneur yesterday, Anuj Basreja, head of Arogya Parivar at Novartis and a good friend of Amit's. And he was telling me that, so many, Michael Porter, Mark Kramer, have interviewed him to try and understand what is it that is the secret of Arogya Parivar's success. How can we copy that enabling environment elsewhere? And, Anuj said, there are things, and, we're trying to map them out. But he looked me in the eye and he said, Milan, I'll tell you one thing, it's the commitment of the individual. Beyond it all, and we talk about leadership, people who see opportunities that other people don't see, find ways of making things happen. I think underneath it all, it comes down to someone who has an idea that they believe in, and they're not going to let it go. And it's a real privilege to work with, speak with individuals like that. And I think I'm sure our audience agree that with Mark and Amit, we definitely have that. Hopefully, through programs like the Intrapreneur Lab, we'll create many, many more. Thank you all so much for your time. Tatiana, any final words or comments from you?
Yes, I just wanted to thank everyone and to let our audience know that we will have the recording of the session and the summary available both on the Business Call to Action website and Business Fights Poverty. So stay tuned for future webinars, and thank you again.
Great. Thank you so much, Tatiana. Thanks again to Mark, Milan, and Amit for a wonderful session today. This does conclude our webinar, What Can Social Intrapreneurs Do to Really Make a Difference? Thanks again, everybody, and have a great rest of your day or evening, depending on where you are. Thanks again.